Okay, well, we'll wrap this up quick. Combined wealth ratios, the tax rates, and again here, $20 per thousand, just under 16 per thousand. That makes that really, really challenging, as Phil was saying, really challenging to merge for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about. The fund balance, expenditure per pupil. Most of this data is going to be at least a year late or a year slow in being updated, okay? We use officially audited state records of every single school district in the state, so there's a time lag to that. So the one thing the consultant can do, the first thing I have to do is update all these numbers to make them 2013 worthy rather than 2011 or 12, okay? The last tab there, if it worked, there you go, yep. Yep, right there, good, okay. This shows you, if you scroll down a little bit, there we go, okay. It's going to cost you over $5 million to equalize the tax rates between these three school districts, okay? $5 million per year, which is 118% of the first year incentive aid. Unlikely to happen for the reasons that Phil can describe to you, okay? So again, just another tool. We take state data, publicly available data, and put it into a very useful format. Okay, that's the tool presentation. Okay, if you have any questions about that, let me know over the next couple of days or weeks or years, and we can do more of that. But we have time for a couple questions or comments or jumping in, or?
We have time for
a few questions. Okay. So, who wants to begin wrapping up the day with a cool question?
I do.
Okay.
Talk about legal remedies to school aid.
Legal remedies to school aid.
Not political remedies, but legal remedies.
Yeah, it's important to differentiate political remedy, political action versus judicial action. And as I showed my cards before, you're trying to go to the legislature and argue that this part of the state needs more money. It's tough. It's a tough sell because they're going to have to take it out of somebody else's pocket to do that. And the politics of that are such that in New York State now, that downstate is very reticent to give up their money. And they say, we need it every bit as much as you guys do, and we're cutting our 7th foreign language in the middle school, and our kids are going to be harmed forever on this. And anyways, it's a tough political argument to win. The other side of the coin, and we went through this, we've been through this a couple times in New York State, of legal challenges to the constitutionality of how the state supports its schools. Okay, went through this in the 70s with the Levittown case, went through it again in the 90s and 2000s with the Campaign for Fiscal Equity case, the New York City case. And as we all remember, just a decade ago, the state lost. The state lost, and in 2007, they put in place a remedy that over, I forget how many years it was, 4 or 5 years, the remedy would be fully implemented with a new foundation formula to drive more money, more state money into the poorer areas to provide a sound basic education for every single kid. Because again, what we are constitutionally guaranteed by the federal government is nothing. What we're guaranteed by the state constitution is not equality of education. Okay, the court's been very clear on this. We're guaranteed a sound basic education. And then lawyers debate what that actually means. But they came to some agreement, 7, 8, 9 years ago. And the system was put in place. And the state was going to respond not just to New York City, which was what the lawsuit was about, but to the entire state, a statewide remedy. They put this in place, and people had some pretty high hopes. Remember those days? Pretty high hopes. And then what happened in 2008? The world changed. Okay, the whole economy crashed. All bets are off. The GEA got brought in, and we are so far behind where we should be on that, on constitutional grounds. So that takes the politics out of it at some layer. Okay, and so there are a couple different groups kind of jockeying right now. I know Mike Rebell, who led that CFE case in New York City successfully, is getting the troops together for a case. I know NYSET is rattling the saber about a case. These small cities have gotten together and are moving forward at some level with pulling together a case. Something's going to happen, and this will be challenged again constitutionally with the state's highest court eventually making a decision on this. It took at least a decade back in the 70s, and it took a decade again in the 90s and 2000s. So this is not going to fix anything for next year or certainly the year after. This is a longer-term deal. It's a little hard, in my view, it's a little hard to justify how the state distributes dollars right now in a rational basis, given this necessity for a sound basic education for every single child, no matter what zip code, no matter what school district. But getting a judge down the road to make that decision is a long-term one. But I do have much more hope for that than I do for the political solution.
Another question? Any other questions? Steve?
Not so much a question, but I think it's important too for people that don't work in education, because some of us live and work in this environment all the time, that the gap elimination started under Governor Patterson, and then has been continued ever since. And the current year, 12-13, the state has less aid to education in total than they had in 2008-09 to all the schools in the state. And the other thing is that during that time, the state budget and the gap elimination was just a nice constructive words to balance the state budget. The state couldn't balance their own budget, so they said, well, we'll take money back from schools to help balance their budget. Since the gap elimination first started, the state budget has grown from about $115 billion to $135 billion. So I think when the governor or the legislators talk to you about the increase in education and school officials should stop crying, I think you need to know that our education funding has stayed flat while the state's budget has grown by $20 billion. So they have a larger bully pulpit, but the facts don't back up what they're telling you.
Yep, absolutely true. Now, in fairness, other costs have increased. You know, we all know the healthcare costs have gone up dramatically, the Medicare costs and so forth, the other mandates from the federal government. But it's part of that broader conversation of what is the responsibility of the state to your children in this area versus the children in different parts of the state who are getting arguably a fundamentally different education, or at least different educational opportunities. Somebody asked me during one of the breaks earlier, I mentioned a book earlier on, and I failed to give the title, and I apologize for that. Somehow it slipped my mind. Managers of Virtue is that book about the early 1900s and the advent of this new form of administration. Really, really, really interesting. If you're interested in doing some reading, there's a book called Hollowing Out the Middle, which is about a couple of communities in Iowa. Issues very, very similar to what you're dealing with here, with kids being educated. The most talented kids tend to leave, not come back, and generationally, you get a situation where the communities are declining, population's declining. So it's called Hollowing Out the Middle. It's not a very long book, really, really interesting, would really resonate with you. And then a bit of a tougher read, but equally interesting. It's more of a deeply it's a lot of community sociology, a little more dense. It's called Learning to Leave. Learning to Leave. It's about a coastal town in Nova Scotia, I believe, that will have a lot of issues that resonate with what I've heard a lot of conversations here, is that these kids keep leaving. They grow up, they leave, they don't come back because there's no jobs. How do we think as adults in the community, what should we do about that? And I think the Hollowing Out the Middle and Learning to Leave are two really, really good thought-provoking books. Parts of it you'll disagree with, parts of it you'll love and agree with, and at the very least it will create again, some conversation locally here to think carefully about how the relationship between jobs and businesses and the healthcare system and the schools and all the rest of it, and how these kids grow up in a community, and kids get all these messages from the community. They don't just get messages from the school. They don't just get messages from their parents. It's all together this happens, and so the solution cannot be a singular solution. So it's a few books to look at, and I'm getting the hook, so thank you very much. I wish you all luck, and I'll turn it back to Jim. I recognize that hook.
A huge vote of thanks to John Sipple for everything he's done for us today. It's greatly appreciated. Benjamin, do you want to kind of finish up for us here? Sure. Okay.
Okay, I get the last word here. So I'll try to put a little synthesis on the day here, but first, I'd like to note a couple of things. First off, if you could leave us evaluation forms completed, that would be great. You can just leave them up at the registration table. We do review those carefully. Also, just so you know, we will be putting the PowerPoints from today on our North Country Symposium website. We've also been videotaping this and hope to put that on there as well. I'd also like to just share a few thank yous. First and foremost, the person I think who was most responsible for making this event happen and who has just been a wonderful colleague and partner on this is Doug Welch. And Doug, thank you for helping to put this together. As always, you know, Jim Schumann was saying that as the chair of the steering committee, his job was easy because he just puts the people in the room and gets out of the way. But the truth is, even a group of leaders needs a good leader, and Jim is certainly up to the task. He's been doing this for 11 years, and you know, he's just put on a good show every year. So thank you, Jim. Unfortunately, the Burt family couldn't be here for the first time in 11 years. We didn't have a representative here, but nonetheless, they are greatly interested, and they'll be following up on this, and we're, you know, always grateful to them. All of the speakers, thank you very much. Dr. Sipple, thank you for coming up and sharing your expertise. Steering committee, thank you very much. The steering committee immediately zoned in on this topic as being the most timely and important one for us to discuss today. Certainly, a huge thanks to our dining services crew back there. Always put on a good meal and a good event, and our facilities crew for getting everything together, and our event coordinator, Laura Ramsey, as well. So, I don't know about all of you, but my brain kind of hurts after all of those presentations. We certainly covered a lot of ground. And to be honest, based on what I've heard and taken in various meetings over the past few months, we really scratched the tip of the iceberg. Obviously, the education situation in the North Country is an incredibly complex issue. You know, we've touched on some of the population demographics implications and how maintaining a strong school district is key to our ability to recruit and retain people, faculty, doctors, what have you. And it's a reinforcing feedback loop because, as we also heard, school aid is distributed on a headcount basis, so you can get a bit of a reinforcing feedback loop there, and so we really need to pay attention to that. It plays in, the education scene plays into workforce readiness. We heard with great eloquence how the healthcare field is related to our educational system. And we heard about how politics and community identity and just a whole number of other issues fit in here. So we also know this. The funding picture is very complex and inequitable, yet we can't expect Albany to come riding to the rescue. First off, there's a lack of understanding of how things are in the rural North Country. You know, we've heard time and time again at the symposium how oftentimes legislation and programs are built around a downstate metropolitan mindset and familiarity. Furthermore, we have issues of political clout. So we've looked at a lot of different ideas here today. Mergers, consolidations, collaboration, regional schools, BOCES, facilities cost reductions, right, Jim? And so we hope that at the least today, we have provided some useful knowledge and information, that we've stimulated some thoughts, maybe some new ideas, that maybe we all have a better look at the big picture. And certainly we have seen that we need to break down the silos that we operate in because it's such a complex issue. And certainly since there isn't a silver bullet or a quick answer, that we need to think outside the box as to how we're going to deal with the current situation in our schools. So don't let the conversation end here. There's both, as Dr. Sipple pointed out, there's both the immediate need of our students in the schools right now, and we need to do, we need to take care of them, but then there's also the, longer-term community questions and community system dynamics that can be degraded, and that's also of the utmost importance for us to address. So thank you all very much for coming. It's been a great pleasure to have you here. So one thing's clear, things can't continue to go the way they are, so go out there and make some change. Thank you.